Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah, that was great. I enjoyed that. That was a cool person to bring in.
Dan is a really nice guy, really easy to talk to get things set up with. I mean, I mean, you can tell by the way he does his work, just a really creative mind too, just an interesting guy. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's 6 after. I say we just get started because that can be one of the things we're going to talk about. I want to just do a little recap of, that event and just, two of the things that I thought worked about that very well are multiple people shared it on, Facebook. We didn't have a large number of people who showed up, but it was a good enough number. And people seemed very interested. I thought the format worked out. And looking at the Transition Longfellow website statistics for example, I can tell that there were a lot of people who were brought to the website because of that event. Even if they didn't show up to the event, they still checked out the website, they looked at it, and they looked at other stuff. And so there was a lot of value, kind of bundled into that event, and it was because people did share it, people did talk about it, and the things we were talking about before worked that time. I think we just need to do more of them.
So did you get a count on how many watches there were on the video? Because I thought there were a lot when I looked at it.
There's not been a lot. For the live event, there were about 12 people who showed up, near as I can tell, for live. And I think the last time I looked on the statistics on YouTube, it was about 24 people, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood have watched it. It has a fairly long appeal. You can look at how the duration, how people they watch really pretty much the whole thing. So once people get into watching it, they watch the whole thing and seem to like it and responded well to it. And so I think the format worked nicely. So not a huge amount of people, but I think there were a lot of people who engaged in the conversation who maybe didn't watch the YouTube video and didn't see it live, but still learned about Transition Longfellow and generated some online conversation and discussion around it anyway. So I think it was all positive and all good.
Yeah, I mean, as far as as our events go, that's pretty successful, getting 12 plus 24. I would say that's quite a success.
Yeah. Okay. So, interestingly enough, too, just by way of an announcement, through other channels and for other reasons, George and I have been asked to do a series of presentations, mostly surrounding gardening. And it's because, we own our urban farms, and, people have been checking out our website more. Our web traffic has been going up fairly steadily, and I think it's a spring thing, honestly. Mm-hmm. But, and so we've been asked to do these online Zoom presentations on gardening topics.
2 of them.
So the first one is for the MGCC, Mac Grove Community Council. And it's just really kind of like a gardening starters basics kind of thing. We're going to take it a little different direction, kind of, and talk about all the benefits of living more sustainably. And, because for us, our urban farms really started, we went through the calendar, it was, like 12, 14 years ago in that time range. And it all started because we decided to get rid of our grass. And, and we planted our first little garden, and then it changed literally the rest of our lives. And that birthed our urban farms, which started out as a joke. But anyway, we're going to start with that in the presentation. And so, and then we're also going to be doing a shorter little bit for, believe it or not, the Green Party of France.
Parti vert de Francais.
Also on gardening and urban agriculture specifically for them. And it occurred to me that we can just take some of these presentations and we can retweak them just a little bit, and we can do other online transition on tap events, and turn them into something like that for Transition Longfellow, and we can put it on the YouTube channel for Transition Longfellow as well.
Et est-ce que vous le présenterez en français?
No.
Even though I understood that.
Yeah, I did understand. No, yeah, we'll be speaking in English for sure. They've got chapters all over the world. And so they said that the audience would all mostly speak English, but 50-50 speak French or English as their primary language. And we'll be presenting with other speakers from around the world, I think. And so we have a shorter time slot for this, and there's multiple presenters, but 50% of it will be in French and 50% will be in English. And we'll be representing the English side of that. So, but anyway, I think it would be, we would love to repackage those presentations and do them as, Transition Longfellow events and similar format sort of thing. We've got PowerPoints that we'll do. And
yeah, so that's kind of sending me off on a couple of other directions with thoughts. But I'm wondering if we should kind of, before we get into that, orient what we're going to do tonight in this meeting.
Sure.
It looks like the Chart Your Yard people are not going to be showing up. No one
right
representing them.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Um,
From the emails going around, I understand that the beds are nearly all sold out, that they've got a couple of possible subsidized beds available.
Yeah, I was questioning why they were, it looks like maybe for technical reasons, they would rather sell the subsidized beds than sell them unsubsidized, which it just seemed like, if people want to pay the full price, just go ahead and let them once the full price had sold out. So it's too bad that we don't have Elizabeth here to answer that question.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would think feel free to drop her a note if you want, and we can maybe ask her to come to a meeting or whatever, whichever they pick. I don't personally have enough information to care. I can understand, depending upon who's doing the subsidies, how that money transpired, that they want to make sure that they give that money out.
Yeah, the subsidies are transitions and the ERG committee.
Oh, okay.
So
okay, there you go.
So it's us.
Okay.
I do wonder if it's because they ask LCC for a certain number of subsidized beds and then just want to use them.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably, it makes sense.
Yeah.
To me.
Which is fine, but I think also we could consider in the future, if they rework their scope, it could potentially be a more flexible thing. It doesn't, the way they ask for it is they ask for that money to specifically go to subsidized beds.
My question about that, I think it relates directly to that, is I noticed that they sold out so quickly this year. And it seems like there's a big demand, and we're being asked to do gardening. Maybe it's just time to see if we can really dramatically increase the number of beds we do each year.
Yeah. Wow. So many ideas coming into my head. Although I do want to follow up and say, I think literally it was probably just they had a certain number of spots set up on the computer, and there was no way for people to register for non-subsidized ones once those sold out. I have a hunch it was a technological obstacle.
Okay.
That meant
That makes sense.
they did that, but
I had the impression that they have this set process where they buy X amount of dirt, they buy X amount of boards, they have X amount of beds as a result of that. That's my understanding of the process. And then they have X amount of subsidies, so they figure out how many that they can sell, and they won't sell more than that. That's my impression. And and if that's the case, it seems like we could just say, hey, maybe we could two of them two groups next year. Because it was literally literally a matter of days, right? I mean, they announced,
Yeah,
and it was days and they were sold out.
yeah. And so that actually, it's a shame that we don't have someone here to find out how their volunteer signups are going as well,
Right.
because that would really, Ian would uh, like to know about that. I have a hunch. Is that the main reason you're on tonight, Ian?
I figured, I mean, partly I'm here because you keep encouraging us to show up.
Good for you.
But yeah, I did also want to talk about the idea I floated with Elizabeth about a potential like rain garden type of complement to Charge Your Yard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, they are different, but we've been talking about maybe doing that as a fall event and trying to get some of the volunteers who do Charge Your Yard who are up for that kind of digging action to work on the pollinator gardens and the rain gardens. So when you said it could be expanded, probably, I wonder if people would want to do that in the fall or if it just needs to be one big spring blowout. I feel like the enthusiasm for starting gardens is a lot higher in
The spring.
spring than it is in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you'd have almost nothing in the fall. You know, we do every year we do free plants, and we do it in 2 cycles. We do spring plants because I always start more seeds than we can possibly really put in the ground, you know. And so we sell, or we started giving away plants, but the demand for them was so high. We said screw it. We did sell. We do self-serve selling off of the retaining wall in the front of our house. And we do the same thing in the fall, and you can't get people remotely interested in house plants or gardening or anything, in my experience, in the fall.
Yeah,
It's like
people are
pulling
shutting
teeth.
down and cleaning things up and putting stuff away.
But in the spring, it's like a feeding frenzy. Everybody wants to do gardening stuff.
Yeah, so that's something to think about, Ian, in terms of doing the other gardens.
Yeah, I think we could definitely get takers for gardens. I think we could get people to sign up. I don't like getting volunteers is another question. That's
Yeah.
I don't know what the prospects for that are. That's kind of what we're like. That's something that transition has a lot more experience in doing, and so I think you all probably have a better sense than we do of if it would be possible to muster the same sort of volunteer enthusiasm in the fall.
It might be possible. I'm curious. My brain just flipped to something interesting, because the Charge Your Yard, there's sort of like this canned thing that they, sort of flop down in a space in the yard. How do you manage that sort of logistics for rain gardens where you're likely digging and everybody's space is different and has different substrates and stuff? You almost have to design each one by one off, kind of. Is that?
So I can just tell you kind of what I'm thinking so far, and just to kind of like fill you in. So this last year we got a bunch of funding through the state Lawns to Legumes program, and part of what we did with that was installation of a bunch of rain gardens. So we did 22 rain gardens in Longfellow.
Very nice.
And we had that was all done through Metro Bloom. So they handled both like the design piece and then the actual like getting a crew out there to dig and stuff. So they would dig and mulch, and then the homeowners would get picked up the plants and planted the plants themselves.
Was that a paid crew that they had?
More or less. So they get so we get a grant from the Minnesota Conservation Corps. It's like a grant of crew time. So the Conservation Corps provides a crew of I think volunteers. I'm not sure what their structure is, but I think it's like young people who are, well, maybe they're paid. I don't know. at any rate, it's a grant from the Conservation Corps, and what it is a bunch of crew time. And so Metro Blooms provides like a crew leader who, you know, tells them what to do. Like, here's where you're going to dig, here's how to do it, like all of the expertise part. But the crew is from the Conservation Corps. So yeah, like not exactly paid, but kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, that's like it was great. It was very like it worked well to do it that way because we you know, it limited how much LCC had to like actually do in terms of mustering people power and stuff. But it's fairly expensive. And if we like, there just are only so many sources for large grants like that that would sustain that sort of program. So I'm kind of trying to think about how we can keep going in that direction, but in a more affordable format, basically.
And so yeah, so which gets back to my thing. So for each one, there's a design element, there's a design component, that is much more critical than it would be for Chart Your Yard, probably.
To some degree, yeah. So what we did with Metro Blooms is we had them come up with a couple like templates essentially. So we had we had a 75 square foot and a 150 square foot, like, you know, sizes for depending on how much room the homeowner had. And then they did, I think there was a like one sun and one shade template for the, you know, the conditions. But then they basically, like we said, you know, you're just going to basically plop that down in their yard. And it's like maybe you change the shape a little bit or something to accommodate where it's going. But the idea was to not have them be spending a bunch of individual design time for each yard to, you know, basically just be fitting these templates in.
Mm-hmm.
And that way everyone's using the same plants and stuff. And so you can kind of, it simplifies greatly, and you know, you can kind of do it in a bulk fashion.
Yeah.
So I think like, and so now we have those templates from them. Like that's part of what we got out of our, you know, our deal with them, is that they provided the templates to us, and the plants lists and everything.
But like even going back one layer than that, like just figuring out the gradient, because in a rain garden, like where it goes in the yard and how, you know, is it feasible because of the, you know.
Yep, there's definitely, you know, it definitely like someone has to look at each site, basically. Like you got to do a site visit to just sort of figure out where it can go, make sure there's enough room, make sure you can get it far enough away from the house. It's not, I don't think, terribly complicated, but I mean, it certainly does involve having someone who knows what they're doing just go and look and talk to the homeowner and say,
because I'm like a technical geek, that's an important detail, because it means it's hard to just like buy them online, like maybe you can the Chart Your Yard boxes, because you know, someone's got to go out and figure out, can you even do this? Can you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So to illustrate that point, my front yard, I've got a maple tree in my yard, as well as an elm that was just planted in the boulevard. The neighbor has a elm tree put in his yard. I've also got lilacs and things. Like figuring out places where you could do it without doing some serious root damage would be the issue in my yard. And so you do need somebody who's got mostly common sense, I think, is what it takes to do the siting.
And you do, I mean, you just do need a certain amount of space too. Like there are people who just wouldn't have, you know, wouldn't have the space essentially, because it's got to be space that you can reach with a downspout or something, but it can't be right up against the foundation. So there are a few, you know, limitations. I will say, I think we kind of tried to like filter out, like we asked a few questions in our application, you know, saying, do you have a 10 by 10 foot area that's 10 feet away from the house or whatever. I don't think we had anyone who Metro Blooms then went out to and was like, oh, this won't work, you know? Like, I thought we would have a few people who it would turn out just like the site didn't work for whatever reason, and I don't think we did. Like, I don't think they had to pull in any of our backup people to fill the spots. So, you know, do people just have plenty of room in their yard if you look, or were people good at filling out the application and and figuring it out themselves? I don't know, but I was surprised that we didn't have any issues with that.
Did they did they get the rain gardens there for free, or did they pay us some sort of stipend? Or
we had them pay, I think it was $150.
Okay.
Something in that area. You know, it was kind of a just like a commitment fee. And we did offer subsidies for people who couldn't afford it, and we didn't actually get many takers.
And is that basically covering the costs of the materials, the plants?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, we mostly just picked a number that we thought was a reasonable contribution, but not overly expensive. So it wasn't like, I think that does, like, I think that would basically cover the cost of the plants and the mulch, more or less.
That's important. If the volunteer time can be covered, if people are willing to pay for the cost of materials, then it can become an ongoing.
Yeah, I think we would be talking in that range generally. So like I did the rain garden on our house just totally myself. I dug it myself and things. I think plants there cost me about $200. And I could have cheapened that up a little by doing a fewer and a slightly smaller garden. So yes, I think materials bought in bulk, you know, bought smartly, would probably be somewhere between $150 and $250 would be my guess for
a questions that I have. When you dug it, or the ones that you know of, what was the time that it took, do you think, in terms of either the crew time or the homeowner's time? And then forgive my ignorance in all of this, but what is how is the work done? What is there specialized equipment, or are we talking about, you know, things that people have at their house, like shovels and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So trying to think what at some point Metro Booms told us, like, they kind of know that their crews can do a certain number of gardens in a day, and I don't remember what that number actually was. I could go look in my emails probably and find it. But it's hard to tell. Like, I don't know exactly how their process would compare to, you know, a volunteer effort or to one person doing it or whatever. So the main process that you do is you basically, assuming there's sod there currently, you got to like rip that up. And that's like, you can use a manual sod kicker, which I think is what Metro Blooms does, or you can get an electric sod cutter. Or you can just dig it with a shovel. That's probably a little bit slower. So I think, like, if you're doing it, you know.
Oh, we've done it over and over.
We rented one, which wasn't expensive, but you have to be ready, like, you know, because it's by the hour or whatever. So you have to have it all ready to go get it, do it, and then take it.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, if we were doing a bunch of them, I think we'd want to, I mean, it would fit well with the kind of the garden mob style, because it would be all in one day or all in 2 days or something. So, yeah, we could do a rental and just move it from site to site and do them all quickly in a row. And so then once you've removed the sod, you dig down. You want the sort of the basin to be, I think, like 3 to 4 inches below grade. So it's It's some digging. It's not a crazy amount, because 3 to 4 inches ends up not really being that deep.
Especially by the time, if there's grass there and you remove the grass, you're you're, a lot of the way
Yeah.
there anyway.
Yeah, you're already about an inch down by the time
Yeah.
you flip the sod.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the other consideration is you do end up with a bunch of material that you got to do something with. You end up with a bunch of sod and a pile of dirt. And so if you're disposing of that, you got to pay someone to do it, or else the homeowner's got to have have a compost heap they can throw it in, or just build a tiny hill somewhere or something like that.
And I'm guessing that's all you can have that conversation when you do the design meeting to figure out the logistics for each site, probably.
Yeah, and that,
So-
those are details that I think we could figure out down the road of, like, do we want to, pay a small fee to collect everyone's material and go dump it at Kern or something.
Mhm.
Or is
I
there
don't
somebody
think-
that wants it?
Yeah, or is there something else we
No.
can do with it? Yeah, it'd be cool if we could recycle in some way or something. I don't think spread across everyone that will be a particularly large amount of money, so I'm not like super concerned about that in terms of general feasibility.
So I'm a little curious. I just had this thought. It's just probably a crazy thought. But I remember watching Reed say this. I think it was on a video at one of these meetings that he was talking about volunteerism, or it was in an email he sent about volunteerism. And we have, one of the challenges that we have is that we have these events, and Charter Your Yard, people come and they do it once a year, or we have the pancake breakfast, and this mob comes once a year. But the most successful volunteer efforts, where you keep volunteers really engaged, happen on a weekly schedule, where people can put it on their schedule and then they come back and sort of have the social interaction with other people, and that social connection, that weekly recurring situation, is critical to keeping and engaging volunteers. That's absolutely my experience in the nonprofit world, where we relied on volunteers. And it just occurred to me that these sort of rain gardens are the kinds of things that maybe you don't just all put them all in the spring. What if you spread them out over the whole summer and just did a whole lot of them, and did as many as you could, and you put one in a week or two in a week, and you just tried to spread them out over the year.
Yeah, what's the scale? Like, what's your dream of how many you'd like to do in 1 year?
I mean, I would be happy if we did 10. I think if we had the resources, like, I think we could find a lot of takers. Like, I think we could do 40 a year if we, had the resources. I think that's probably like a bit out of reach. But I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for it in the neighborhood. If we did 20 a year, I would be delighted with that. I think that would be, I would consider that a total success. But
Yeah, and
yeah, really,
that- I think even with a lot of people, I'm just trying to imagine getting that many dug out based on my own front yard, rain garden. It's a chunk.
Yeah, so I would like what I'm thinking about, like, if you had a group of, like, say 4 people, I think they could probably prep the site for a rain garden in like a 2 to 3 hour kind of social thing or something, just as a general, like, estimate here. So I mean, I guess the idea of doing it as a recurring thing, totally doable from a like a practical perspective. You can plant natives pretty much whenever. You can plant them in the middle of summer. You just got to water them more often. So in terms of, like, the rain garden, definitely doable. In terms of the volunteer stuff, I don't have as good of an idea of that.
Right. Yeah, I just have a sneaking suspicion on if you look at the amount of labor you'd get out of the people who did volunteer, if you could get a handful of people to sign up to come back multiple weeks, you would end up just getting a lot more volunteer labor out of a smaller pool of people. And I think a lot of people would sign up for a weekly gardening activity. I think it might be of real interest to people. And that could be a fun thing, if you made each of the events kind of like a fun event for people to go volunteer at, especially.
I think so too.
Yeah, that would be one of the questions is, will people want to show up weekly to kind of do some hard digging work?
Right.
Like maybe, I wouldn't mind that, but I don't know how many people would be excited about that.
With George and I have volunteered for lots of stuff in our life, and none of the stuff we volunteered for has ever been easy.
He says that he's willing to do that right now, but
I didn't say that. I just said we have.
No, I'm talking about Ian. I think his life is about to change dramatically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I don't need to be like caught up on sleep to show up and dig a hole.
He's having a child.
Maybe if there's a child and now he'll want to go dig a hole.
Yeah, just get away for a little bit.
But the other thing I was thinking about is looking at the population. So chart your yard. I'm going to say it's when I did it, which it's been a couple of years because of my broken ankle. It was a predominantly middle-aged and above population. When you're talking about digging holes in the ground, I wonder if, I believe all the high school students and maybe middle school students are required to do service learning as well as their academic work. I'm wondering if tying into the schools and getting some young, strong backs involved would be
a great idea. I know the food shelf that I volunteer with on a regular basis takes advantage of that as well. So
yeah, that's a good idea, because it is. I think you're right to think about that, because I think middle-aged population is probably. I think like I've noticed that you all have a lot of people who are very enthusiastic about native plants and stuff, but likely are probably less enthusiastic about straight hard labor.
And especially like 3 or 4 hours of prolonged
hard labor.
but if you're not doing it by yourself, if you do have a team of people, I think the time goes faster, and the work is not as heavy. If there's more than one person that can help with it.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that where more hands make lighter work. And it can be if it's a more of a casual social thing, the work goes a little slower, but it's easier too. So yeah, it's certainly not out of the question. But I think
it also depends on if it's 75 and sunny. And just perfect temperature, that's more of an incentive, I think, for people to be willing to do it than, if it's rainy out or something like that.
Well, if it's
probably
95 and humid.
Drop off, but, as long as there's a core that's dedicated on a regular basis.
And that actually is one of the weaknesses of saying this is going to be done on this day, this year. And there's a rain date. And if that's just a total washout, then you're really stuck, as opposed to saying we're going to be doing it for several days.
Has Charter Yard had rainouts in the past? I'm sure they can do it if it's lightly raining, but have they gotten, thunderstormed?
I think they have a rain date or have had a rain date in the past.
Yeah, I think they usually plan a rain date. I'm just curious if they've had to use it. And how much that's affected their volunteer force. You'd think that by now they would have at some point. Can't get lucky that many years in a row.
Especially this spring, yeah. But I don't know. That would be a great question to ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this year they're planning 2 dates. they're doing 2 weeks, a build date on each week and an install date on each week.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, boy, that idea of the rain gardens is a great one. Well, and if they don't want to tack it on to chart your yard, I don't see a reason why we couldn't try to organize, another group through Transition Longfellow. I suspect there'd be a lot of support for it.
So this is going to get into one of my big questions I'm having, as I fail to revolutionize volunteering in Longfellow neighborhood by the end of March.
Yeah.
Um, so we can always come up with great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I know a dozen people with great ideas. It's getting enough workers to implement them, and part of that is the organization, definitely. And this is something that could easily go into LCCs, an ERG committee, or transitions, or I mean, Chart Your Yard is kind of taken off as its own independent organization. I feel like in some ways having those splits weakens the building that core of people, of volunteers, that social core. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think I think to me that's probably a good question to ask. The opposing question is then if we want to avoid that, is the Chart Your Yard group willing to take this on as well and design it around their own work schedule and their own calendar, and their own promotion, to tack it on to that, to just kind of almost expand their program and what they offer, because there's probably people that don't want to Chart Your Yard but do want a rain garden, and vice versa.
And actually, so I also want to ask you guys about your urban farms.
Yeah. Okay.
You have your own thing going on separate from Chart Your Yard and transitions, but obviously really well aligned with them. What's your thinking on that?
On which? On the volunteer stuff? I mean, we don't use volunteers. Our urban farm is just a funny thing that we called our garden when we started it. And then we started selling sourdough bread and wanting to promote sustainability. So we made a website, and that's just all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And because of that presence, we've been getting asked to, do presentations around stuff, but it's no more than that. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not volunteer events, but I think that presentation component, in particular, like this greenhouse activity, I mean, those really do fit well into these other goals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we did, when we did the greenhouse, we did it as, Transition on Tap, as part of Transition Longfellow, because then we can share it with all the transition folks. We shared it also on our Urban Farms website. It's, we're just here to spread the word, however and wherever we can do that.
And technology has expanded that, and in the era of COVID, I think it's even accelerated it, because people, I think, are online or interested in online more, and social media presence.
But I think there's opportunities where we can use that format to enroll volunteers potentially. I mean, if we were going to do something like this, what I would do is I would have Ian sit down on Zoom for a half-hour interview, invite people to talk about the benefits of rain garden and all the rain gardens and all the issues around irrigation and being so close to the river and what happens when the rain comes down and we have all these hard surfaces, and where does the water go and what happens and why we need those rain gardens, and inspire potentially people to sign up to get the gardens and volunteer to put them in. I think that's the mechanism. And then of course you put that in a blog and you write about it. And I mean, that's the approach I think that we need to take to each of the programs that Transition Longfellow wants to launch. We have to put a whole mechanism around them. And I think that those video events can be one of the tools by which we communicate those things. And it's a tool in the tool chest.
Yes.
For all of the work.
Yeah, and I actually think at some point we might want to put a call out for videographers.
Yeah.
Good, who are willing to do some work and make that their volunteering.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ian, obviously one of your ideas was Charter Your Yard has this group of people who have experience. They've got a pool of volunteers ready to do work. Did you have other thoughts in terms of organizing it with Charter Your Yard versus with Transitions versus ERG? How are you?
So my thinking, my thinking is that this is a project that speaks very well to both Transition and the ERG committee. Like, I think it's a big overlap in sort of the interests of these groups. And LCC in general I think we are good at organizing. I think ERG has a good collection of kind of expertise and knowledge and stuff. We are not always as good at reaching and mustering volunteers. We sometimes we can, but we are not. We don't do it kind of as reliably and as well as Transition and Charter Your Yard do. You all just seem to have. You've got a really big network of people. Like you reach a lot of people, and you seem to be able to muster enthusiastic people for things. So that's my thinking in kind of that seems like something that both groups are interested in, and that we each have things to contribute, and that you all could help us help ERG with some of the things that ERG doesn't do quite as well in terms of the volunteer recruitment expertise sort of thing.
Well, I'm pretty sure, one way or another, we could find a way of asking and bringing volunteers your way, however you wanted to organize it. I just have no doubt we can find some way of helping to do that.
And are you looking at this year as being that's the need you're trying to fill? So this time frame coming up here really pretty soon?
It doesn't have to be this year. No, if it just doesn't get together until next year or something, that's totally fine. What I would like is just to have this be an ongoing thing. So yeah, I think this year people are obviously very excited about gardening and outdoors and stuff. And so I think doing it this year could certainly capitalize on that. We definitely saw that last year. we had people who were just so enthusiastic about it because that was what everyone was doing that summer. So it'd be good in that sense, but yeah, no, otherwise I don't, it doesn't particularly matter to me when it gets going.
Yeah, I'm gonna say don't lose any steam on this. Keep going. After 1 year, it's much better, even if it's just a small program where you get a handful done and figure out how long it takes, how many hours of work does it take. I think doing at least a pilot this year makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I would much rather have a small repeatable thing going than to do a big blowout in one year and spend a whole bunch of energy and then, you know, not reproduce it. I would be more interested in a model of something that we can do year after year.
And this fits well into my idea of trying to get an extended series of things going on in the neighborhood. And one of the things I'm going to say about that, and Mike and I have changed some emails and social media commentary on this, is you need to support each other in these, like the core group of people from ERG and transitions and everything needs to really support the other people who are trying to get projects going to build that. I'm going to say right now, looking at April, we've got the bumblebee identification thing going on April 15th to talk about, in particular, the rusty patch bumblebee. And then the week after that, we've got the Earth Day cleanup and also the first of the bird walks that Dave's planning to host on the river. Then the next week, we've got Chart Your Yard's first round of installations. And then the following week is the second week of that. I'm thinking about hosting the following week a cleanup of garlic mustard and things at the Shasta site over by Sullivan School in Brackett Park. And then Friends of the Mississippi River is doing a garlic mustard pull the following week. So I think we've got a whole bunch of things starting to pile up here in the spring. And if we can continue to schedule things through the summer, I think you'd really could build a core of people who are committed. But again, it's going to take at least a handful of people who are willing to show up every time just to support.
And you know, and the other thing that needs to happen, you know, it's when I rebuilt the website for Transition Longfellow, I made it, especially the calendar as a for example, to be user maintainable so that anybody could add events and things, with the goal that you know, it could become a source for all the kinds of things that you just, you know, said. But there's nobody out there gathering that information and putting it into it. And so, and I'm unaware of any central location where somebody can find that sort of stuff. And so I'm curious, since you have all that in your brain, can you put that on the website, on the calendar?
Yes, and that's one of the questions I came into tonight wanting to ask is, yes, I definitely can. And that is something that I'm kind of taking on, at least for a while, to be the clearinghouse and to take care of that calendaring and talking to different people. My question I wanted to make sure before I started to load things in there was, does it make sense for transitions to be this umbrella organization and take care of umbrella organization in the sense that it's the thing that says, hey, there's environmental stuff going on in Longfellow.
Clearinghouse, yeah.
Where you come
Or just
to
a
get
forum.
it.
Yeah, just a forum where people can see all kinds of stuff.
I would say my personal feeling is yes, and I've done that in the past because I've been on those volunteer things for Friends of the Mississippi River, you know, and those organizations. I have posted them and blogged about them on the Longfellow site. You know, I guess I just see it all like as a synergy working together. And if those are projects going on that engage people in, you know, environmental or sustainable efforts, all the better, because also if somebody volunteers for one of those things, it may generate their interest in volunteering for other things. You know, they may take somebody, 2-3 people with them that they know, and then that group comes and, you know, says, oh, that might be fun to do, a rain garden or something like that. So I see it as synergy.
Yeah, putting as much stuff in. In fact, we had, before COVID hit, we had a handful of local sustainable businesses that were regularly posting some of their own classes and stuff, like verma composting, vermiculture, and that was, oh, I forget. But there were a couple of different businesses. One of them was Care Market, and I just see that calendar as a place where anybody who's got something going on that's sustainability related in the community or near this community should be able to post it. That's what I want. And I would like to see it full of stuff.
Yeah, and I guess I see like going back to like, what is the measure of success in the transition movement? You know, is it, you know, how many people you get to a meeting, or is it results? And so all of that is generating results. If I see transition results as rain gardens that have a positive effect on the, you know, on the community environment, or bird walks, so people have a better connection with nature, you know, whatever it is, I see it as measures of success.
I'm with you on that. I did want to check in, and it's a shame that we don't have a couple of the other regulars on the call right now.
Hopefully they'll watch the video. And then they'll send us emails with the answers to the questions we're asking.
But as far as you're concerned, you would be okay with kind of just filling up that transition Longfellow calendar. So one thing that I want to talk to you about, and I'm guessing there are going to be different philosophies on this, is I see the advantage of having people be able to enter their own events. It sure saves a lot of work for whoever's in charge of it. The disadvantage is, do you guys look at the LCC website at all?
Mm-hmm.
I find it just impossible to work with, because like the extra large fonts are just all over the place. There are images of all sorts of different sizes. You can't tell where you've moved from one event to another. And so some standardizing to try and get it to be like,
yeah, that's all taken care of in the way that it's done on Transition Longfellow website. It's all just data driven. And so every event has there's a template in there, and you just put the data in, and it's going to present every event the same. And it's going to have a, you know, consistent look and feel through the whole experience, no matter what. They could be loaded with 1,000 events and it would still present fairly nicely.
Yeah, and for those outside organizations, it allows you to link off to that event that is coming from, you know, Friends of the Mississippi River or whatever it is, so that it directs people to the information that's more specific.
And that just as a side note, completely minor detail, but it could end up being really important. The sharing library out there has been getting more traffic lately. I recently did some change to the website to feature that, which is one of the things I had promised to do a while ago, and it is getting more traffic. I haven't looked to see how much more stuff is leaving, but there's been more stuff added to it as in terms of items that people are willing to share. And there's a fair amount of like household tools now. And I'm curious if there's any gardening stuff that might be able to be used for like putting in rain gardens. And if there's somebody offering that sort of stuff out there, we may have a nice little collection of things that we can use already that would be the stuff that we need to do the installs. We should at least go look through it, or maybe even ask, and that's another thing we can ask our community for, and ask them to put right there in the sharing library so we know it's available.
Yeah, so that's something. The problem with sitting down to talk to you guys is my mind kind of starts
200 ideas, yeah, 200 ideas.
All this stuff. Because I was actually looking at other, there's sharing library to a library software out there that maybe has some advantages, but it's all set up for slightly different takes on how to do it. So
Reed, you're running a small tool library,
focus.
right?
Pardon?
You're running a small tool library, right?
Yes, I have, and given the things that are going on in the neighborhood, I got like a text from someone saying, "Hey, there's someone going into your garage." Okay. See what they come out with and make a judgment call. So I need to figure out how I want to handle that. Okay, so I'm thinking about trying to start out by trying the transitions calendar as being that main organizational calendar, and then directing traffic to that.
Yeah, it's got the social share and everything right there in it and stuff, so it makes it easy to share on Facebook and things.
And if there are things that are, you know, in the neighborhood, like I know the river cleanup stuff is the river, you know, the garlic mustard and all of that, you know, those are specifically located in this neighborhood. And so I see that, you know, as a primary emphasis to people, you know, to say this is within your area. You know, you can walk to, you know, many people can walk down there to these events. And then if people are looking for more, they can go to FWR or whatever and go, oh, well, they have one, you know, up in Coon Rapids or down in Hastings or, you know, wherever they are. They can expand beyond that.
So the other thing that Ian and I were talking about was, and this is, I want to get away from this idea that we've got all these people maintaining different calendars, doing different things, but we've been talking about Google Calendars, one of that can be embedded into a web page.
Yeah, I know. I took one off that was on the Transition Longfellow website because that's what they used to do.
The one big advantage of it would be then people could just say, like, and maybe this is something that we look into in the long run if things really do build a core of active volunteers. The thing I like about it is then I just add that Google Calendar to my calendar.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Google Calendars. You can do that with any calendar if you want. Whatever the presentation is, there's a standard calendar event file that you can generate from any calendar that will move from calendar to calendar to calendar.
It's not for specific events, but for the whole calendar?
No, it's an event that you can add to your calendar. There's a standard internet format to a standard calendar file. You just have to, you know, download a link to download that, you know, calendar file.
Yeah. So what I was talking about was if this became a seriously regular set of events, saying, you know, I've got my work calendars in one color, my personal calendars in another, and then my volunteering transitions calendar would be another one, and it's just always there, not event by event. But maybe that's more of a later stage to get that going.
Does the transition site do like a do you have like an iCal feed that's generated from the calendar?
There is, but I'm not letting people like add to calendar. Yeah. No.
I'm just thinking that like if we could use that, like we could even just like suck that into a Google Calendar thing.
Sure.
You know, and that way people would be able to easily add it from Google Calendar without having to know about what iCal is or whatever.
Right.
I mean, just having that available makes
it would be a link on the website that just says add to calendar. Right.
And do you have any ability to like create like multiple feeds, but depending on like the categories or things like that?
Yep, you can do whatever you want. I mean, the whole back end of the database is wide open, so you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know,
Just
so,
I'm kind of thinking ahead of the technical aspects of what Reed is envisioning, and that if he is successful in creating one calendar that kind of has everything, that'll be great, but it'll also be too much for some people. Like if some people are really just interested in like you know river gorge restoration or whatever, um, they might not get use out of a calendar that has the entire span of sort of environmental issues that transition is interested in, but they might get use out of a calendar that was just like I don't know, outdoor events, or
right.
or there
I
might be
think
people who
I
just
think
want to know
we'll
about
have
zero waste events, or
I think that we'll have a better sense of, things like styling and organizing the calendar once there's more stuff in it. And
yeah,
then we could start to look to see how we might categorize them and organize them. But, right now we hardly ever have more than a handful of events on the calendar. Even when we were actively going out there and fishing for them. I know there was a while when George was specifically adding stuff in, and I was, soliciting events from businesses and stuff to, even then, we rarely had more than a handful of events, coming right up at any given time.
Yeah, the most I remember was 4.
Yeah, and so I think this is a lot of conversation around what is going to be a minor little thing.
Yeah, I think it's good to know that that the option is there, because that way it's I think it makes sense for Reed to start investing in this system.
Yeah.
Knowing that
the website is a standard Wix website. People love to hate it, and it's worth hating. But the back end is wide open, and if you know anything about Java or JavaScript, you can do whatever you want with it. It's just completely wide open. It's how I built the sharing library. That was free. Didn't have to license any software. It was just free.
That's great to know. And I'd already been starting to divide things up into categories of activities for just that reason, that some people are going to be interested in the food, gardening, and things like that in particular. So yeah, that's very helpful to know. So I'll start to
well, and if you have a list of categories that you think events would fit into, so we know that we could fit every event, just tell me what that is, and I'll add it to the database that those events go into, so we can, it takes nothing to get that done. And so, just let me know, and I would add that to the screen and when you're adding your events, so that you can start categorizing them right away.
So the other thing that plays into this is, so now we've got, at least we've settled on a calendar for starters, and see how that develops. But in terms of getting things to schedule on the calendar, trying to build up this summer full of activities, what do you guys think is a reasonable frequency to ask people to come out and do things? And this would include things like the Transitions on Tap, having events that are basically just watching videos and things like that.
Well, I think some of that is going to depend on, how things really play out over the summer in terms of restrictions being lifted, and what people's behavior around that is going to be. Are people going to go out of town because they feel like they now can? So that could affect people's behavior. Are events that have been put on hold for over a year, like running events, along the river, are they going to come back at some point during the year? And so there's going to be more competition for, I think, people's time, and sort of this pent upness could I suppose, happen. So it's a little bit hard to guess, but those events go on. The kinds of things that you described have been going on before. And so my guess is that people are going to gravitate to the things that are familiar and likable to them. That's my take.
And I'll answer that from a slightly different perspective, from just a public perspective. How much stuff can I have coming at me to absorb and digest? I think it would be reasonable, for there to be, 1 or 2 things a week at least to, be out there to think about and to be notified about and hear about. And
So, and like when I said that, I guess the first thing that popped in my mind was saying, if we could have one event where people were doing something like chart your yard, like garlic mustard poles, like building rain gardens, one event a month where we're asking people to show up and work, and then try and get something each week that may be a transition on tap or some other more lightweight activity.
mm-hmm.
Do you think, is that the right amount to start with?
I think it would be a goal to achieve, or to reach for, because right now, let's just say, for example, we've got the monthly meeting. If we try to do a monthly transition on tap, I'll see if I can, whip myself into agreeing to that. And you said you would do some.
Yeah, I think we can find people who are going to do the work for it. I don't think we need to do the work except to say, hey, here's your opportunity, come talk.
Yeah, all right.
Is the transition on tap, are you thinking that it would be, via Zoom? And
First,
it would be at the same sort of time, like a weeknight? My guess is 1 a week, to me, might be too many, because again, I think as the weather gets warmer, there's going, and the light cycle, extends further into the evening. I think there's going to be less interest in doing that on a regular basis, unless it's something that's like the greenhouse thing, where there's some real interest in what this person has to say, to draw people. But again, as restrictions ease, I think the competition is going to be greater, and people are going to finally, feel like they have Zoom fatigue, and they might not be interested in doing that. But then we also run the risk of, if we do them in person again, are we going to, is that going to go well with people? Because I think people are going to be very cautious about being out, with larger groups of people, even after their vaccination.
But I think it's just going to be the kind of thing. I think the lovely thing about transition on tap, thank you, Emily, for starting it. It was originally an in-person face-to-face event. We're transitioning it now to this, Zoom thing. But it can always go back to what it was, and we can play it by ear on a month-by-month basis based on how the world is opening up. But right now we've got the Zoom thing that works, and we can open it up as is appropriate. So I think that's just an easy factor to deal with.
And some things are better Zoom, like having the guy from Montreal, it doesn't matter if he's in Montreal.
Yeah.
He's on an equal footing with everybody. And so the expectation is, when people come into a Zoom meeting, that's how it runs. The other thing too is that they can watch it later.
Well, my vision for the ultimate transition on tap is that we do that face-to-face via Zoom. So you have a gathering of people, and you may be talking to someone from anywhere, and you're still recording it via Zoom, but you have a number of people together.
I'm going to be honest with you. What I like about Zoom meetings, meeting presentations, is I can play them at 1.5 times speed.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
because so much of conversation, like it's different if you're in person, then you're really enjoying it. But if I'm sitting in front of a computer, speed it up. I just want to get the information and turn the screen off.
You can also stop it, restart it. You just have all of that flexibility. And
Well,
even if
yeah.
it's live, you still have some of that flexibility that I can, go into the kitchen and prepare dinner. And as long as I'm hearing it, and if it's on a a mobile device, I can take it with me.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think once a month is probably doable.
Okay. And then, so maybe, and given that there are also 2 meetings, although I guess is ERG going to stop meeting over the summer, do you think, Ian?
No, we'll keep meeting.
Okay. Because I saw something that traditionally it had tapered off during the summer. Is that true? Or is that
No, I mean,
random?
summer's usually when we're busiest because, we got a lot of stuff going on. So no,
Okay.
we'll definitely keep meeting. I don't, we're hoping that maybe at some point it'll be back to in person, but that's just TBD.
It was just a note I saw somewhere in the minutes of something, I don't know where, that surprised me. So, all right, I need to really get on this and try and get one event a month and then talk. And Mike and you and I can work together on figuring out some people to invite for talks. Although actually the ERG, some of the people like Dave might want to do a little presentation about birds on the river as well as doing the.
We can definitely feed you some content. We've got a few different sources of people who would definitely be have things to do. I mean, Dan Schultz, if you want anything related to wildlife or pollinators or whatever, you just point him in a direction and then cut him off when his time's up.
Between him and Carolyn, definitely we've got it all covered.
all right. Very good. Well, that'll be fun. I've got to pick a date and a topic for the next one, I guess. It'll be fun. And then, or if you're going to do one.
And one thing that we should also let you know about is the park board candidates, like citywide offices, are all up for election this year. So we were talking about setting up candidate forums for the park board. Maybe doing one in June and then doing one maybe in September ahead of the elections. So, all right. And then Ian, can I ask you to start setting a date, like an approximate date for, because I think we should go ahead with some rain garden installations later in the year. And just as one of those monthly events that's actually asking people to show up and do some work, I think that would be a great one. So if you could start thinking about that, when might be a good time for you, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give it some thought. Sadly, it's like, for me specifically, this summer is going to be a bad time because Catherine's due in June.
Congratulations.
Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine's here.
Making you
But yeah, I mean, I can think about, what would make sense. And I'll give it a little thought. I think like, if you can start thinking about like, how many people in what format and that sort of thing you think would be is reasonable to achieve, that'd be good, because that'll change the, sort of how we plan, right?
Yeah.
So if we're doing it in a smaller ongoing basis, we'll just have to figure out some things like, how do we decide where it's going, and like how do we get plants, because that's one thing that is it's a little easier to do in bulk, because you can just buy a bunch of flats from a wholesaler or whatever. If we're doing a few at a time, it's a little trickier, not undoable, but just we'll have to think about it.
So I don't know, we're already at 7:15. I don't know if you guys are in a rush to get off. I was to say, one of my one of the things I've been thinking about is whether it makes sense to try and split things across, like eventually get to something pretty much every weekend, have something going on Saturday morning, versus saying there's going to be a certain like week with multiple days of doing something, because a lot of projects are often better spread across adjacent days. So I'm thinking something like this, start on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, have work days. That way, if there's rain, you've got some flexibility, and just it allows you to react to things that go wrong, as well as giving volunteers different days that they can show up that work with their schedule. So when you said that, I was wondering if that would be a great time to say, we're going to start things on Thursday and do some more on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, try and get things wrapped up. I personally find it easier to say I'm going to give up one weekend of my month and to doing some service, as opposed to having things spread out across every weekend.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an inspiring discussion for me.
All right, well, very good. One small minor note about the calendar. Each event prefers to have an image, and most events do have them. If you have any trouble finding images to put with them, let me know, because when other people have added events to the calendar, I like to have images in them, so I do check it, and so just let me know, and I can get images to put in the events that you've added if you want me to.
Okay, great.
It looks so much better when they're there.
Yes, and when they fit in with the overall theme instead of like screaming
Yeah.
weird stuff at you.
Yeah, right.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks.
Is there anything else that we should have talked about?
No, we'll do. Yeah, we'll let you know when we have our. We'll probably get a video of these upcoming events that we're doing, and we'll maybe get them posted, and that'll be fun.
Yeah, that could be a transition on tap.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were
That
thinking,
was our thinking.
that was our thinking that would be our next one. We'll kind of perfect it with, these next couple rounds, and then we'll do a transition on tap about it.
Great.
All right.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Nice to see you. We'll post the video in a little bit.